In the turbulent heart of the Mediterranean, on the island of Corsica, a child was born who would one day cast a shadow over all of Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte. Born on August 15th, 1769, came from a family of minor Italian nobility, their status respectable but their means modest. At the tender age of 9, young Napoleon left his island home, a stepping stone into the vast and formidable world of mainland France. He was enrolled in the military school at Brienne-le-Château, a place of stark discipline and rigorous study. Often mocked for his Corsican accent and fierce pride, he found solace not in camaraderie, but in the silent company of books. His passion for mathematics and history was noteworthy, hinting at a mind built for strategy and grand designs. In 1784, his academic excellence earned him a place at the prestigious École Militaire in Paris, the pinnacle of French military education. He graduated a year later, a newly minted second lieutenant of artillery, his future an unwritten page in the annals of history. The winds of revolution began to howl across France in 1789, shaking the foundations of the old world. Napoleon, a man of ambition and a child of the Enlightenment, embraced the revolutionary cause with fervor. His first true test came at the siege of Toulon in 1793, a port city held by royalists and their British allies. With brilliant and audacious artillery placement, Captain Bonaparte broke the siege, forcing the British fleet to retreat in disarray. This victory was his baptism of fire, earning him a promotion to brigadier general at the astonishing age of 24. 2 years later, in Paris, he faced down a royalist mob, dispersing them with a now famous whiff of grape shot. His decisiveness saved the Directory, the fragile revolutionary government, and made him a hero in the capital. It was during this time he met Joséphine de Beauharnais, a charismatic and influential widow with whom he fell deeply in love. They married in a civil ceremony in March 1796, a union of passion and ambition. Just days after his wedding, he was given command of the beleaguered French army of Italy. He found the army in a pitiful state, underfed, unpaid, and demoralized. With electrifying speeches, he promised them honor, glory, and riches in the fertile plains of Italy. He led them across the Alps in a series of lightning-fast campaigns, shattering the Austrian and Sardinian forces. Victories at Lodi, Arcole, and Rivoli became legendary, showcasing his tactical genius and personal bravery. He returned to Paris a conquering hero, his name on the lips of every citizen. Seeking to strike at Britain, the Directory approved his ambitious plan to invade Egypt in 1798. The campaign was a mix of exotic adventure and military reality, a clash of civilizations under the desert sun. He won the Battle of the Pyramids, but his fleet was annihilated by Admiral Nelson at the Battle of the Nile. Cut off from France, he governed Egypt, introducing reforms and sponsoring scientific expeditions. Hearing of political instability back home, he secretly abandoned his army and sailed back to France. He arrived to a hero's welcome, seen as the only man who could restore order to the chaotic republic. On November 9th, 1799, in the coup of 18 Brumaire, he seized political power with the help of his allies. The Directory was dissolved, and a new government, the Consulate, was established with Napoleon as first consul. He was now the most powerful man in France, effectively a dictator in all but name. As first consul, he initiated a whirlwind of reforms, stabilizing the economy by creating the Bank of France, centralized the government, reorganized the education system, and began work on a unified legal code. In 1800, he once again crossed the Alps, this time to confront the Austrians at the Battle of Marengo. The battle was a hard-fought victory, securing his political position and driving Austria out of Italy once more. The Concordat of 1801 reconciled France with the Catholic Church, healing one of the deepest wounds of the Revolution. In 1802, a grateful nation voted to make him first consul for life, a stepping stone to even greater power. His ambition, however, was boundless. The title of consul was not enough. On December 2nd, 1804, in the Grand Cathedral of Notre Dame, he realized his ultimate ambition. In a moment of unprecedented audacity, he took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. He then crowned Josephine, who knelt before him, making her Empress of the French. The French Republic was dead. The First French Empire had been born. The Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive legal system, was finalized, becoming his most enduring legacy. But peace was fleeting, as the other great powers of Europe viewed his empire as a threat. In 1805, Britain, Austria, and Russia formed the Third Coalition to challenge his dominance. While his navy was crushed by the British at the Battle of Trafalgar, his army was invincible on land. On the first anniversary of his coronation, he achieved his most brilliant victory at the Battle of Austerlitz. He masterfully tricked the combined Russo-Austrian army into a trap, shattering their forces. Austerlitz cemented his reputation as the greatest military commander of his age. He dismantled the Holy Roman Empire and established the Confederation of the Rhine, a collection of German client states. Prussia, alarmed by his power, declared war, only to be utterly defeated at the Battle of Jena-Auerstedt. Napoleon entered Berlin in triumph, the master of Central Europe. He implemented the Continental System, a large-scale embargo designed to cripple the British economy. In 1807, after defeating the Russians at Friedland, he met Tsar Alexander I on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River. The resulting treaties of Tilsit brought a temporary alliance with Russia, marking the zenith of his empire. To enforce his continental system, he invaded Portugal, and then, in 1808, he turned on his ally, Dane d'Artois. He deposed the Spanish king and placed his own brother, Joseph, on the throne. This act ignited a brutal, widespread insurgency known as the Peninsular War. The Spanish ulcer, as he called it, would bleed his empire of men and resources for years. Despite his love for Josephine, her inability to provide an heir threatened the future of his dynasty. He divorced her in 1809 and, for political reasons, married Marie-Louise, the daughter of the Austrian emperor. In 1811, she gave birth to a son, Napoleon François-Joseph Charles, who was immediately given the title King of Rome. The future of the empire seemed secure, but his relationship with Russia was deteriorating. In 1812, Napoleon assembled the largest European army ever seen, the Grande Armée, to invade Russia. Over 500,000 men crossed the Niemen River, a seemingly invincible force marching into the vastness of the East. The Russians, under Barclay de Tolly and later Kutuzov, adopted a scorched earth policy, retreating ever deeper into their homeland. The Battle of Borodino was a horrific bloodbath, a victory so costly it felt like a defeat. Napoleon entered Moscow a week later, only to find a deserted city, an empty prize. Then fires broke out across the city, set by Russian patriots, destroying any hope of winter quarters. Forced to retreat, the Grande Armée was now at the mercy of a foe more terrible than any army, the Russian winter. Starvation, frostbite, and relentless Cossack raids decimated the once mighty force. The crossing of the Berezina River was a final, desperate struggle, a catastrophe within a catastrophe. Of the more than 500,000 who invaded, only a few tens of thousands staggered back out of Russia. The disaster in Russia was the beginning of the end, shattering the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. Sensing his weakness, the nations of Europe formed a new, sixth coalition against him. Napoleon hastily raised a new army, largely of young, inexperienced conscripts. In October 1813, he faced the combined armies of his enemies at the massive Battle of Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations. Outnumbered and ultimately betrayed by his Saxon allies, he suffered a crushing defeat. The French were driven out of Germany, and the Allied armies prepared to invade France itself. Despite a brilliant defensive campaign in the early months of 1814, the odds were insurmountable. Paris, the heart of his empire, surrendered to the Allies on March 31st, 1814. His own marshals, weary of endless war, confronted him at the Palace of Fontainebleau and refused to fight on. On April 6, 1814, with no other choice, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, abdicated his throne. He bid a tearful farewell to the veterans of his old guard in the courtyard of the palace. The victors exiled him to the small island of Elba, off the coast of Italy. He was given sovereignty over the island, a tiny empire for a man who had once ruled a continent. But his story was not yet over. His ambition still burned. Less than a year later, on February 26, 1815, he escaped from Elba with a handful of followers, landed in France and began a daring march towards Paris. The troops sent to arrest him, including the famed 5th Regiment, instead flocked to his banner, shouting, "Vive l'Empereur!" He entered Paris without a single shot being fired, beginning the period known as the 100 Days. The powers of Europe, gathered at the Congress of Vienna, were stunned and immediately declared him an outlaw. They formed the 7th Coalition, assembling their armies to crush him once and for all. Napoleon marched into Belgium to strike first, hoping to defeat the British and Prussian armies separately. On June 18, 1815, near a small village named Waterloo, he met the Allied army under the Duke of Wellington. The Battle of Waterloo was a brutal, day-long struggle fought in mud and rain. The French cavalry launched heroic but futile charges against the unbreakable British infantry squares. Timely arrival of the Prussian army under Gebhard von Blücher sealed Napoleon's fate. As his elite Imperial Guard recoiled, broken for the first time, the cry went up, "La garde recule." The battle was lost, and with it, the empire. He abdicated for a second and final time, his 100-day gamble having failed. He surrendered to the British, hoping for asylum, but they had other plans. The British exiled him to St. Helena, a remote, windswept rock in the middle of the South Atlantic. It was to be his prison and his final home, a place from which there would be no escape. He spent his last 6 years in exile, under the watchful eye of his jailer, Governor Hudson Lowe. He dictated his memoirs, fighting his last battle in the pages of history, shaping his own legend. His health steadily declined in the damp and dreary climate of the island. On May 5th, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died. His final words reportedly, "France, alme te dami, Josephine d'Or." He was buried on the island in a nameless grave, a fallen eagle far from the land he had shaped. In 1840, his remains were returned to France in a grand ceremony, the Retour de Cendres. He was laid to rest in a magnificent tomb under the dome of Les Invalides in Paris, a final, triumphant homecoming. From a minor Corsican noble to the master of Europe, his life remains a testament to the extraordinary power of a single will.